Welcome all to today's podcast with Jason Fried from 37 Signals, also known as Basecamp. I think you guys recently changed your name, isn't it?
Yes, we're 37 Signals again now.
Cool. Well, I've known the company for a long time, and I've always been in awe with what you guys have developed. But maybe you can describe, maybe in 30 seconds, where you guys started and where you are now.
Yeah, so we started out actually in 1999 as a web design company. So we were just doing websites for other companies, and we got really busy, got pretty popular, in demand, and started taking on a lot of work, and couldn't end up managing it all very well. Ended up dropping balls, and things were slipping, and communication was sort of scattered everywhere, and we needed a better way to manage all the work that we were doing. So we built our own little internal project management tool, which we started using with some customers, and they said, "Can we use this? What is this?" And we said, "I don't know. It's just this thing we made." And eventually, like, the light bulb went on, and we go, "There's probably a product here. If we need this, other companies need it. We're hearing from other companies who need it." So we turned it into a product and called it Basecamp, and launched that in 2004, and have since made a handful of other products over the years. And most recently, Hey, so HEY.com, which is a new email service. So we're primarily using or running Basecamp and Hey are the two products that we have today. And now that we're back to a multi-product company, we're going back to the original name of 37 Signals, because we were called Basecamp for a while when we just had Basecamp. But now we're both, and now we make two things, and we'll probably make more things in the future. But fundamentally, just briefly, like, our products are try to make really straightforward products, software as a service, web apps, mobile apps, that try not to do too much, but just do the things that they do really, really well. And that's the plan.
Okay, and in terms of company size, people, customers, what are roughly the numbers?
Yeah, so we have tens of thousands of paying customers, and 65 employees, maybe 66 actually. A new person started today. I think we're 66 now. And we're based all over the world. So we've been working remotely pretty much ever since the beginning for about 20. We've been around for 23 years, but for about 20 years or so, we've been working remotely. And the majority of our employees now are outside the US, which just shifted recently.
Oh, okay. And I think you even wrote a book about remote working, not?
We did. It's called Remote Office Not Required. Yeah, they came out in 2013. So it's been out for quite a while now, a little bit ahead of its time, I suspect. It didn't actually sell very well initially. I think it was too early, and during the pandemic, it picked up.
So now most of your employees are outside of the US, and do you find that more challenging than having them just in the US? Time zone, language, culture.
Yeah, everyone's English speaking, so we're okay there. But time zones are tricky. And as we begin to expand more and more outside the US, we have to think more about teams and overlaps and who's able to work with who on what time zones. So it's a little bit more challenging, but totally doable. My business partner and I worked remotely for many years. He was in Denmark while I was in Chicago at the time. So we kind of grew up together, working 6 or 7 hours apart. So, it's actually quite nice to have only about 3 or 4 hours overlap with someone else, and then you're naturally have a lot more time to yourself that way. So it's actually an advantage, but you can't. It's really hard to do it if you only have an hour or two overlap. You need, like, I think, at least 3 or 4. So that's kind of how we sequence our teams.
Okay. So your co-founder is still based in Europe, or is he
He was in the U.S. for a long time. He moved back to Denmark year and a half ago, something like this. So he's in Denmark now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, your co-founder sort of invented Ruby on Rails, not?
Did invent, yes. He invented Ruby on Rails. Ruby, of course, was a language invented by someone else in Japan. He invented Rails. So just so that's clear for everybody. So yeah, Basecamp, the product, was the first Rails app ever. Rails was extracted from Basecamp and open sourced in 2005. And it's been powering all sorts of companies since then. It's been pretty exciting to watch.
Yeah, very cool. And is that one of the reasons that, because I mean, looking at your team size and the number of customers, that's a very small team size to build. I know both of your main products quite well. That's impressive productivity levels that you guys are achieving.
Rails has a lot to do with that. Also, just our general approach to working. We built our own work methodology called Shape Up. So you got to currently basecamp.com/shapeup, SHAPEUP. You can read about it. We have a free book. We wrote a book about this. That's kind of our secret sauce, although it's not a secret because we decided to share it with everybody. But that's a huge productivity enhancement for us. Allows us to get a lot done in a short period of time with very few people. And also just decisions you make, about fidelity and what are the quality needs to be and what not to do. I think we've become very good at deciding what not to do. That's one of the best ways to make a lot of progress, is not to do things, actually.
I've coached about 20 Dutch software companies in the past year, and I always tell them at the beginning of coaching, I'm mainly going to tell you what not to do, because you already know what to do. You probably already know by now if you've come up with a product in a company. But if you have a pretty sharp list of don't do all of this, don't go here, then you're going to save a lot of time and be. So I can recognize what you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fundamental and profound thing, even though it sounds so stupid and simple and meager, but it really is huge. Deciding what not to do is probably the best way to make more progress.
And it's very tough because with my co-founder just launched a new company, and we're already now in all the stuff we could be building. Let's build it. Let's go this way. Let's go this way. It's very attractive to get into, to to create a tremendous long backlog, and then you're never able to do it all, or you do everything a little bit, and you don't have the focus on getting it out there.
This is a big part of Shape Up, the methodology we came up with, which is that there is no backlogs. There's no long list of things to do. You decide what to do every 6 weeks, and that's it. You don't look beyond that. You might have a directional vision about what you want to build, but you don't decide everything you're going to do up front and then make a long list and try and get it all done. Every 6 weeks, you work on a set of projects. After that, you look around and go, where do we want to go next with this? And you decide as you go. And that way you're always current and not sort of working from an old list of things. And it's a much more, we found it to be a much more effective way to do it. But you still have the same struggles, which is like, well, when do you stop? You just keep adding more and more and more stuff to the product. You still have the same challenges, and what not to do is still a big part of it. But at least you're not working off a long list of things that every idea you've ever had. That doesn't really work very well.
Okay, and would you say that's if you compare your methodology to Agile Scrum, would you say that's the biggest difference, or are there other big differences?
That's one of the big differences. Another one is that with Shape Up, nothing can take more than 6 weeks. And I know you can look at Agile or Scrum and say, well, we work in these 2-week sprints, but you can work on something 2 weeks at a time for 24 months or for 12 months. With Shape Up, the whole feature, whatever idea you have, has to be done in 6 weeks or less. That way things don't drag on and on and on and on and on. So you've got to figure out the simplest, clearest, easiest way to get something done, and figure out what the real value is, and do that. That's one of the things. Also, just making up as you go. There's no backlogs. We're not working off long lists, and we're not constantly shifting our attention between different tasks. People are very focused on individual projects for a certain period of time. Then you move on to the next thing. So it's quite a bit different there. There's other versions. We don't do daily stand-ups or weekly stand-ups or anything like that either. It's a very different approach. There's some similarities, but the other thing is nobody gives you tickets. Nobody tells you what to do. There are projects that are defined, but then the team decides how to get it done themselves. So you're not taking tickets and that stuff. There's no stories or any of that other stuff too. So it's just a different approach, I would say. And I would say it's really worth looking into.
Okay. And yeah, I've heard some companies be very successful with it. Actually, one of the previous guys I interviewed recently, a Dutch software company called Moneybird, is using it, and they seem to be very happy with it.
It's slowly but surely kind of making its way out there. We're not really aggressively pushing it, but it's something that we think will take hold, and it really is a better way to work. And we've tried pretty much all the ways.
Okay, so you have tried Agile Scrum before you came to this?
Not like formally. Not we didn't follow it to the letter, but we followed similar methodologies or similar approaches. So, but we could see what's wrong with them at a fundamental level. And so Shape Up came from us trying to solve a lot of the problems that we couldn't find elsewhere. And This is just born out of 20 years of experience building products. There's nothing theoretical about it. It's very practical. And it also it also recognizes human nature, which is, if you make long lists of things, you end up getting frustrated because you never get to them all. And we don't want to work from a place of frustration and feeling like we're always behind, feeling like we're always sprinting. Even the language is really different. Sprint, to me, it's a bad word, in that, like, you're tired at the end, you're burned out. That's what a sprint is. I don't even want that language to make its way into the way we work.
And I've seen in your blog that I follow, you regularly write that we shouldn't be using all these army terms in software businesses. I like that approach.
This is something we put in our book. It doesn't have to be crazy at work, which is our last major book release, which was that, for some reason, business always gets sort of tangled up with sports and war. All the examples are sports based or war based, and I just don't think it's a healthy way to think about things. Maybe more sports. Sports might be a better parallel, but war is, about destruction and killing and defeating, and I don't think you need to look at business that way. I don't think it's a zero sum game in that way. And so, we've talked about how companies, like, they want to conquer the market and capture mind share and target customers, and they hire headhunters, and they have a sales force, and they want to pick their battles and make a killing. It's like, you don't need to talk this way. And some people think it doesn't really matter, but I really do think it does matter. When these are the words in your head, the posture you take is one of destruction versus creation. And war doesn't create things, it destroys things. And I just think you should think about creation and then let the chips fall where they may, versus trying to destroy everything.
Okay. And in terms of 37 Signals, would you mainly see yourself as a product led growth strategy, or as a sales and marketing led?
We're product led. We don't have sales team. Never had anyone in sales. It's all word of mouth. And so, we've done a lot of non-traditional marketing, in that we've written a lot of books and written a lot of stuff and shared a lot of things, which is now called content marketing, but it wasn't called anything. When we started, it was just, let's share as much as we can. Let's share our opinions. Let's share our point of view. Let's share how we work. Let's show people the behind the scenes, and let's put out books that embody our philosophies, because we think these are valuable things for other people to know. So there's that side of the marketing component, but we don't actually have like a marketing department historically. We don't have a CMO. We don't have that. We're primarily product led, although we want to get more into being more intentional about our marketing, but we've never really been intentional about it in the past.
The books, and obviously also putting Rails out, definitely is a form of marketing, not?
It is. I mean, but it's not. I think a lot of it comes down to intention. So we didn't build Rails as a marketing vehicle. We didn't write books for marketing purposes. They do, of course, introduce people to our way of thinking, and Rails, of course, introduces people to our way of working, and shape up also with the way of working. But there's not like a marketing strategy, like we need to write a book so we could X, Y, or Z, or we need to release a framework so we could X, Y, or Z, or this is going to increase sales or growth. Like, that's not the reason we do it. It's a byproduct of doing it, but it's not the reason we do it.
Now let's talk about growth. Your company grew to substantial in the past 20 years, but you're not taking the, like most SaaS companies, the traditional approach of raise money, maybe the first round with fools and friends, then go to VCs, and then grow, and then go public. You guys took a different route, not?
We did. We bootstrapped the business ever since the beginning. We're 100% funded by our customers. When I say funded, I mean we sell products and they pay for them. We don't have investors in that regards, and we've just decided to grow at our own pace in our own way, and not get ahead of ourselves. And if we can't afford to do something, we don't do it, or we find a cheaper way to do it, or we wait until we can't afford to do it, or whatever. But we've always believed in being profitable and running an economically solid business, one that makes more money than it spends, one that has healthy margins. And we live within our means within those margins. And that means we're not taking out Super Bowl ads, and it means we're not spending, $50 million on ad campaigns that end up with negative cost of acquisition, or I should say, like, we don't want to lose money on customers. We just want to do the right thing, maintain a profitable business, maintain a solid conservatively economic business in that way. Which also means there's probably opportunities we missed and things we will never maybe be as big as we could have been or whatever, but size is not a goal of ours. Growth, like we want to grow because we don't want to shrink and die, but we don't want to we're not aiming for 2x, 10x, 20x every year. It's like that's not a thing we've ever been attracted to.
So healthy growth paid by a healthy margin on a software product.
Yeah, and sometimes there's not even growth. Sometimes it's a little flatline, that's fine too. It's about you plateau and you hope you want to be in an upward trend over the long term. But some years are more growth focused than other years. It's a long term thing. I think it's a little bit more like a life. There's times when in life, over a handful of years, you make a lot of progress in life, and other times you just sort of exist and study and wait to use those skills in the future. So I think that's kind of how we've always looked at it. It's about looking back on the arc over time. Were we up and to the right? Yes. Looking at it every moment is not really, in my opinion, a healthy approach. Just like staring at a stock every single day will make you crazy. Hopefully you buy good companies and you kind of hang on to them for the long term, and in the end you hope that you do well that way.
If you look at the stock every day, then the past 2 weeks have been tough weeks for you.
Brutal. Brutal. Terrible. And sometimes you should sell things, right? But you know what I'm saying? Over the long term, you pick good companies. Hopefully you do well.
Okay. And looking at, let's say, the past 5 years, what would you say is the one or two most important lessons you've learned?
I'd say one important lesson I've learned is, for me, this is a little bit more for me. It's hard to transfer lessons to others, I think, because everyone's in a different situation. But I'm happiest when I'm not worrying about measuring things. I'm happiest when I'm building something new and I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe in it. And so I find that I do my best work. What I'm trying to get to is you got to know yourself, I think. So, for example, if I was under sort of a regime at work where I was being measured constantly, I would not be a happy person. That's not how I like to be. So I've realized for myself that I need to just build things that I believe in and do the best job I can and have a hunch and follow it and see where it goes. And some things work out better than others, but for me, that's an important thing that I've realized about myself. And so whoever's listening, whoever you are, I think it's important for you to figure out in what environment will you do your best work and will you be happiest? Because I think that's the best shot you're going to have to maybe hit a success. I mean, this is hard to begin with. And if you're always fighting uphill battles in environments that aren't conducive to the way you want to work, it's going to be very hard, I think. So find that place. I think that's one thing. The other thing is don't be afraid to stick to your principles. I think that's another thing that's become harder and harder as voices have become louder and louder. Companies tend to not want to say what they believe and not want to stand for things that they believe in because they're afraid of alienating a certain group or a certain collection of other people or whatever it is. And I just think you got to stand up for what you believe in and live or die by that, basically. There's the word die. So you could see how you could easily fall back into the war things, right? But that's very important. Got to have a point of view and believe in it. So those are two specific things I think that are really important at a macro scale.
And so I guess it also counts for your company culture that you have to as perhaps as the founders, be clear to your employees about it and then also keep enforcing it. Or
yeah, I think it's important for everybody to essentially know not like what the company believes, but not at a not in a written format, frankly. I don't, or not like in a mission statement style format, but you need to constantly live the things. I don't think there's much value in the written list of things because they either are self-evident because of your actions or they're incorrect because you're not living up to them to begin with. So I'm more of a person who's like, let the actions speak for themselves. Try to be fluid in that things can change. and don't feel like we can't try something new because we said we wouldn't do something before. For example, when we switched to becoming Basecamp, we used to be 37 Signals, and we switched to the name Basecamp. We decided at that point, this is 2014, not to do any more products anymore. We're going to be a one product company. And then a few years ago, we just had this itch, and we had to build this new email service called Hey. And had we just said, well, we said we would never do something like this again, then we would have missed an opportunity. We just decided to be fluid and go, we're going to try something because we just feel like we have to. And that's the more important value, is like, you can change your mind. Changing your mind is a good value. And I think that's important, even though you still want to stand for things that you believe in, but you can change your beliefs over time. But the best way to do that is to not have this written thing that you keep butting your head against. So that's typically my feeling. And as far as company culture goes, I've always believed that culture, it's not a static thing. I always think about it as a moving average. What's the last 50, 90 days been like at your company? That's your culture. It's not what it was 2 years ago. It's not what you say it is. It's what is it actually? How are we to each other? How have we been to one another? What have we done over the last 50 to 90 days? That's the culture. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And do you find it tougher with everybody remote and now even in different countries to keep everybody on the same page? I guess you fly them in once in a while and to physically see each other.
Twice a year we get together. We didn't do this during the pandemic, but we just did it recently in March in Miami. We all got together. I think it was March. And it was wonderful to see everybody again. So we do that twice a year. We fly everybody into the same city and hang out for a year, or for a week. Sorry. But yeah, it's as you get more people in more places across more time zones, it is more challenging. Which is why writing is so important to us, and I think so important to remote companies. Video chats are handy occasionally, but not really great to try to communicate with the whole company, because it's hard to coordinate times and everyone's available at the same time. So you can't really rely on a real-time culture when you have people all over the world. It has to be more asynchronous, more written down, more thoughtful. And I think that's a really important thing. But the teams that are working together on a daily basis, they probably should catch up at least once a week, probably in some sort of a real-time format.
You would say instead of a daily stand-up, you prefer to have a weekly gathering to get everybody up to speed and do everything asynchronous?
In Basecamp, the tool, there's this feature called automatic check-ins, which will prompt people on a daily basis to ask them what they worked on. And so we don't have to do a daily stand-up, in that we don't have to pull people off their work and coordinate schedules. People just write up every day what they worked on. At the beginning of the week, they write up what they're roughly planning on working on, or what they hope to get to this week. And that is a lot of information that's being shared on a daily basis without having to coordinate any schedules. Then during the week, there's a lot of small team work. So whenever we build anything, feature, for example, in a product, there's no more than 2 people working on it. 1 programmer, 1 designer. So 2 people can catch up frequently without having to really coordinate schedules across 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people. That's what becomes hard. 2 people, pretty easy. They can catch up in real time occasionally when they need to. But for the most part, most of the work is done asynchronously. And as a team, we typically get together once a week just to kind of catch up with each other. But it's not to talk about the things we can write down. It's about catching up on things we don't write down. That's sort of the value of these weekly sort of camaraderie moments.
So then there must be a strong discipline for people to write things down, which is a bit of a challenge with a lot of people, not?
Yes, but that's exactly how it goes. So we hire great writers. It's a big part of what we do. And it's actually like a primary, it's a primary skill, no matter what role you're in. It's that. So you've got to be a great writer. And if you're not, this just isn't the right culture for you.
So how does your onboarding process of a new employee look like? Is there like you read all our books and then we start, or do you have like a company manual on this is how we do things? How does it roughly look like?
Yeah, so we do have a company handbook, which is also public. So I'm trying to look at the URL. I think it's basecamp.com/handbook currently. We'll probably move this over to 37 Signals at some point. But yeah, if you go to basecamp.com/handbook, I'll pop this in our chat so you have the link at least. That's all public. So we ask people to read that. We give them access to Basecamp, of course, our tool that we use to do all of our work. And the beauty of writing things up and having a written culture is people could read. They can go back and read. You can't do that if you're just having meetings all the time. First of all, no one's going to watch, if let's say you recorded them all, no one's going to watch 180 hours of video of boring meetings. Not going to happen. People can read though, and they can read at their own pace and on their own time. So having a written culture means there's a rich history of how we work and examples of how we work. Some cases we bring people in and they'll meet up in person. So I just hired a new head of product strategy who's going to work with me on product strategy, and I flew him in for a week, and we hung out together for 3 days. It wasn't a full week, but for 3 days we hung out for the first weeks just to kind of get to know each other in person. And some teams will do that, some teams won't. It sort of depends. During the pandemic, we didn't do it, so there'd be a little bit more video time and whatnot. But we have a prescriptive way to do it. You read this, you read that. You catch up with your team. You're assigned kind of a buddy who's sort of your point of contact that you can rely on to answer questions and get to know the culture and the company a bit. And it's been working out pretty well. We're always adjusting it because it's not always perfect, and different roles are better at it than others. Like our customer service team has a really wonderful training program. They've got a very detailed onboarding process, not quite as much on the design side. Programming side's a little bit better. It sort of depends on the different roles. But one thing I would say is we try to get people involved in real work as sort of soon as possible. That way they're not sort of wondering how things go, but it's sort of nice to jump in with someone and get to real work. It's a great way to explain how things go.
I guess with a tool like Basecamp, you can also make the writing and the sharing of this data within the organization easier, not?
Yeah, so I mean, since everything's written, there's a full history of every project, and it's not a transcript. It's not like Slack. Slack's you cannot give someone, you cannot say, here, go read back across 14 chat rooms and try to make sense of anything. Chat's a terrible format for absorbing information later. It's fine for like right now, terrible for later. With Basecamp, all the conversations are structured. They're structured on message boards. They're structured behind things. So if there's a to-do or a piece of work that's being discussed, the discussion is attached to the to-do itself. So all the discussion on that page is about that very thing versus trying to bounce between. In a transcript, there's a bunch of different conversations happening. So it's just, Basecamp is a structured place to have communication that's centralized and long form. And it's very easy to kind of read back and dig into things that interest you and find out how things work. So it sort of comes with the tool and the medium. So it is a nice way to get up to speed.
And so it sounds, for maybe for the people on YouTube Basecamp, to me it sounds a bit like more mixing of content, knowledge with work, which are mainly to-dos, things that have to get done.
Yeah, so it's to-dos, it's schedule items, it's a lot of message boards, so a lot of like long form writing, and then decisions with comments that are attached to that writing. Everything in Basecamp has comments attached to it. So if you have a to-do, you can discuss the to-do on the to-do. If you have a to-do list and you want to talk about the list and not just the to-do, you can discuss the list. There's a comment thread on the list. There's these check-ins, which is this automated system that polls people on a regular basis to submit information like, what'd you work on today? What are you going to work on this week? What's something you've learned in the past month? Things like that. So there's this constant pulse. There are chat rooms. We do have direct messaging built into Basecamp. These are tools that can be used, but they're not the primary method of communication. The primary method is writing something up in long form, attaching thoughts to things in context, and having a real library of progress versus a long transcript list, which is just not, it's not progress. It's just random conversations.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered a lot of content in 30 minutes, and we like to keep it to 30 minutes so that people don't have to invest all of their day in listening or watching this. But I think for people who are more interested, well, you've shared a couple of your publications and URLs already. I'll make sure to post them in the show notes as well. I think for developers that haven't looked into the Shape Up methodology, you should. It's definitely worth having a good look to see if it's something, if it's for you or not. Maybe you're more traditional, or maybe you're more into the Agile Scrum camp of thing. I guess it also depends on your product and your market.
Yeah, I think the way I would look at it is just ask yourself, is what we're doing working well for us? And if you're very satisfied with what you're doing, then you should probably stick to that. If you're like, we used to make more progress, we're not making as much progress anymore. It feels like we're doing a lot of work, but not moving forward. Things never seem to ship. We just keep working on stuff. Things don't ever seem to ship. If those things keep coming to mind, Shape Up is really an interesting method because it's all about shipping things of high quality. it's not just about working on stuff; it's about shipping, which is a different thing.
Yeah,
So
cool.
anyway,
Well, thanks,
great.
thanks a lot for this session.
Anytime. This is great. Great to talk to you again. It's been a long time.